All right, folks. First of all, we didn't expect to be doing this. Can everybody hear us? Hey, let's see if we can. We're having some technical difficulties here.
Yeah, making ourselves visible.
You can see us? Can hear us but can't see us. All right, we're working on the visual aspect of it. Here we are. Okay, here we are. That's our Sharktopus producer whose visage is blocked, but we are visible at last. Thank you very much, everybody. Hold on a second. I'm going to thank Emily. Walter, while I'm doing that, I'm thanking our mystery person. Can you tell people why? Yeah, tee it up if you could.
Well, first of all, I think that anybody who listens to this show is probably at least sympathetic to a certain sensibility that is shared by RFK Jr., at least in part. You know, he's a man concerned with a lot of the same issues of surveillance, government intrusion, the corrosion of civil liberties, and corruption, and so on that we discuss here. And so his candidacy today was transformed into an auxiliary candidacy for the Trump campaign. He's going to now campaign for Trump. He's going to remove his name and stop running in the states that Trump needs to win. And he's decided to not be a spoiler, which he concluded was the likely outcome of staying in the race, which he would deliver to what are now the people who have pretty much consistently and over a long period and with great creativity and cost frustrated his ambitions merely to be a candidate, first of all in the Democratic primaries and then an independent presidential candidate. So he got up and he gave a speech that, you know, I was particularly impressed by, frankly, especially after last night's rather translucent and content-free Democratic acceptance speech from Harris.
Yeah, should we just show the beginning of his speech?
Sure.
Or yeah, hang on a second. Here we go. Oops.
United States. I began this journey as a Democrat, the party of my father, my uncle, the party which I pledged my own allegiance to long before I was old enough to vote. I attended my first Democratic convention at the age of 6 in 1960. And back then, the Democrats were the champions of the Constitution, of civil rights. The Democrats stood against authoritarianism, against censorship, against colonialism, imperialism, and unjust wars. We were the party of labor, of the working class. The Democrats were the party of government transparency and the champion of the environment. Our party was the bulwark against big money interests and corporate power. True to its name, it was the party of democracy. As you know, I left that party in October because it had departed so dramatically from the core values that I grew up with. It had become the party of war, censorship, corruption, big pharma, big tech, big ag, and big money.
So that's how he started. He went on to, well, if you want to go ahead, Walter. I mean, there were some remarkable parts of the speech. There was a comparison to Putin that was, I thought, very, very striking. It was very aggressive and kind of heartfelt speech. Angry, but sort of justifiably, I thought.
Right. He basically said, we go out, and Biden has gone out criticizing Putin, the tyrant, for unjust elections in which an adulatory state press props him up, and other tools are used that we consider undemocratic, but he saw those same tools used against him, and he was not subtle in his comparison of this party that has squeezed him out. And apparently, according to his campaign partner, Nicole Shanahan, put spies into their independent campaign, use all sorts of legal and other techniques to frustrate their ballot access. I mean, they couldn't even get on. Not only were they reviled by this press that is so servile now, but they were barred after having cleared incredible hurdles from even getting on the ballot in some cases. And
he said tens of millions to begin with in terms of legal challenges. So I think that number is probably right. Looking at the number of cases that have been involved.
And so, I mean, it was a remarkable speech for that reason, because he put it on the line that we had come to resemble our enemies in ways that are absolutely disturbing. And I mean, that's not news perhaps to these listeners, but I think to the people that Kennedy was addressing, it might be. And the other thing that I found just instantly relatable about the speech was that it treated America as adults. It was not an appeal to feeling. It was not an appeal to some kind of glorious past or values of an amorphous, abstract kind, but to constitutional and social values that we all understand of fairness, freedom from surveillance, intrusion, harassment, censorship, and so on.
Yeah, he might have gilded the lily a little bit in terms of what the Democratic Party used to stand for, but
yeah. Well, yes, you're right. He had to, morally rebuke them for falling from their at least professed standards, whether or not they met them completely. I mean, the Kennedy family, it could be said, was the benefactor of certain dirty democratic skills in certain elections.
Absolutely.
And I think that's
I'm going to turn
a matter of record.
This light. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's a matter of record at this point. But if you think about a person like RFK joining, not the real Donald Trump, but but publicly joining the Donald Trump that we have come to know in his Marvel Comics version, for any other reason but that his back was against the wall personally, politically, and I have to say I'm a bit of a sucker for it, because I don't do this, and Matt and I don't do this, for the glory and to make friends. He felt a moral compunction that I think is genuine, a moral compulsion that I think is genuine, because it's not going to matter from Kennedy's point of view whether the American sailboat has green sails, red sails, or blue sails. It's on the verge of sinking in some fundamental way. If you can't run, real candidates, if you can't be free to speak your mind, if and we also have to recognize this is happening in the context of a successful legal battle against Biden social media censorship, which is looking more promising than any of those others so far.
Yeah, and he devoted a significant portion of his speech to that issue. He made sure to point out, like, look, I want everybody to understand this is not a personal complaint. I could do that, essentially, is what he said, but it's a more important issue than this. The news blackout, he gave sort of an apostrophic, dressing down of the assembled media, saying it's not your fault that the Democrats have become this authoritarian force, but you could have stopped it. You know, you could have done something, and you didn't. He talked about how Ross Perot, when he ran for president, had 34 interviews by, you know, sort of major networks, and he said he had 2 live interviews, and you know, an assemblage of hit pieces, which is already increased, by the way.
Well, I mean, this happens. You know, he makes this announcement, and it's my understanding he's going to join Trump at a rally tonight. Maybe it's happening at the moment. I'm not sure. But this happens, and quick as a bunny, as they used to say in the Midwest, out comes a hit piece in the Atlantic from a journalist named Kurt Anderson, former editor of New York Magazine.
Yeah, I was going to say, well known to some of us present. Yeah,
right. Smearing him for having sold the author a gram of cocaine. Yep, cocaine. Once again, something America should be alarmed about after all the Hunter Biden stuff, after being found in the White House, you know, and rather poorly or non-investigated. But RFK, an admitted recovering heroin addict, at one point laid a gram of cocaine on his journalist friend, not knowing that the dude was going to burn him someday in a breach of ethics among drug addicts, even worse than in my opinion, you know, than many of the others that can be, you know, committed these days. Oh man,
it was
asked for it, dude.
Yeah,
if you
no.
want
It was up in a heartbeat. That thing was up. I guess it was probably ready to go, but still.
Yeah, it was up there, and it was being retweeted by other Atlantic figures, and going around. And when reading it or seeing a Twitter account on which it was being promoted, I saw David Axelrod saying, I forget which name, if it was his father or somebody else. Joseph Kennedy might have been the sort of family patriarch, would have been shocked, ashamed, whatever.
Joseph Kennedy was the biggest rum runner in the East Coast.
Well, yes, yeah. So yeah, his Prohibition era rum running great grandfather would have been appalled, not by anything else than that he would join forces with Donald Trump. You know, the shady character who, you know, I guess.
Didn't Joseph Kennedy have significant commercial dealings with the Hitler government, if I'm remembering correctly?
No, I'm not going to speak to the specifics of that. I've seen it quite a bit. He was Kennedy, ambassador to
England. Yeah.
You know, he had a colorful rise. Okay, let's put it, a very Irish story, a Martin Scorsese long script, and but anyway, this later generation of Kennedys, having washed its money clean, as I was talking about last night, through the mill of the Democratic Party, is now supposed to disdain garish real estate agents and so on.
Yeah. So speaking of that, some of the Kennedys have released a statement already. Here is Kerry Kennedy. Who is Kerry Kennedy? That's her brother. His sister. Statement on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s announcement today. We want an America filled with hope and bound together by a shared vision of a brighter future, a future defined by individual freedom, economic promise, and national. Individual freedom is an interesting choice for them to talk about initially.
Well, so does that. He agrees with you on that one, and most of them. But he has an allergy to empty rhetoric, especially that espoused by the people who've been trying to friggin' grind him into the dirt and throw, bury him.
Yeah, they've been trying to shank him. We believe in Harris and Waltz. Our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of the values that our father and family hold most dear. It is a sad ending to a sad story, blah, blah, blah. That happened.
It might be the happy beginning to another story, kids, because he's 70 years old and could run for president in 4 years after having maybe established a much higher profile among the American people. He also, in the speech, and I thought this was convincing, said that it was really ultimately not love for Donald Trump or agreement with Donald Trump on all major issues, but that it was a sense of comedy over existential issues of corruption and censorship particularly, but also because he's got 10 years, he feels, of active, participation in government potentially. And he wants to do something about the fact that 1 in 3 kids have diabetes right now. And that, ad nauseum, that America is sicker. I mean, he absolutely, with no regard for the fat phobic movement and all these claims of, body sensitivity, said that if people were obese when he was a child, they went to the circus. They were sent to the circus. The Kennedys have always been known for their, touch football and sailing acumen, and
Right.
athleticism.
Yeah,
but
right.
that was a real howitzer shot right into the sensitivity wall.
Yeah, you can only imagine the kinds of jokes that went on in the Kennedy compound when the cameras were off. But look, this is a historic moment. Why is it a historic moment? For a couple of reasons. It changes the mathematics of a general election, assuming that the election is going to happen on the level, which I'm beginning to have my doubts about. But if it is, this changes things significantly. But more than that, Kennedy's speech and the message that he's bringing with this speech is a big one, because what he's essentially saying is, I was a Democrat. I wanted to be a Democrat. I was basically forced out. I was not allowed to participate in the primary. They've spent millions of dollars, not just keeping me off the ballot, but all kinds of other people off the ballot.
And he didn't mention it, but I'm sure he's cognizant of the fact that someone he knows, Tulsi Gabbard, who was often rumored to be, a potential running mate for his run, got put on the shit list as soon as the guard changed, and followed through airports with the bomb sniffing dogs and so on. I mean, what was he to do if he was to believe anything that he pretends, and I have no reason not to believe he's sincere, that he pretends to believe? What other move was he to make? Was he to hand off the presidency to the people who were reviling and trying to destroy him?
And this is the thing that I keep coming back to with the Democrats of this era. I guess what they want is they want everybody to be Bernie. They want everybody to just take it and when asked, to show up and pledge allegiance. But there are going to be a lot of other people who have, who thought they were good Democrats over the years, who are getting kind of tired of being censored, told they're Russian agents, that they're crazy conspiracy theorists, that they should be the subject of federal investigation. I count myself in this number, and I'm not even like terribly political as a person. It took years before I reached the point of saying, you know what, why would I ever give my vote to these people who do nothing but, talk about me as a traitor to my country and, all these other things. All the more so for somebody like him, who's just not even allowed to participate in politics. And, when I listen to the people from the No Labels Party, when I talk to the people from the previous Nader campaigns who talked about, oh yeah, you have no idea how intense they get about keeping competition out, and they've really widened the scope of kind of that idea. What are you going to do? Go back and support those people? You can't, right? And so this message of his, I think it's going to resonate with some Democrats who are feeling screwed over, I think.
So the conventional wisdom on the effect that this will have on the horse race, or the actual voting, is that certain part of his support will fade back to Harris. It's hard to believe, but some tiny bit. Some will go to Trump, or else it won't go to Trump because they can't get enthusiastic about this and so on. But I would suspect that a more profound influence of his change of heart, of his alignment with Trump, will be that he will draw Democrats away. They won't be drawn away in droves, but they will in some number, because I have to believe, and Matt, I don't want to talk about my journey because I hate using the word journey, but mine is not dissimilar. And I promised myself that I'll go to my grave never telling anybody who I vote for, because I really believe that is our own private business in this country. And I'll never tell anyone who to vote for. I'll never instruct them. That's not what journalists do, from where I come from, or in my mind. But there are certain matters of public record, and your political donations, if you've made them, can be publicly accessed. And I did contribute to his campaign back during the primaries. In case I'm going to front run anybody who wants to do a gotcha on that. Because he was at that time campaigning in order to amass the money to have a campaign.
Right.
So it was not yet a real, supporting a candidate. It was supporting a potential for candidacy, which I believed in. So, but, with that caveat aside, I found the speech substantial. I didn't feel that he told any lies. He could have probably gone on for hours and detailed some of the operations that have been run, and so on. He's obviously put his reputation and money into this legal challenge to his censorship by the Biden administration. So that is a mark of his sincerity. This was not a political speech today. It was kind of summary of the state of our affairs politically, and an expression of rebuke and of resolve to do what he can in the political system to pursue the things that were causing him to run in the first place, public health being probably the greatest of those issues.
Public health and censorship now merges with that, really, because that was where I think he started off really as a critic of Fauci, the public health system, and we saw it in the Twitter file stuff. It was so aggressive, the censorship, the attempts to get him off the various platforms from so many different groups. The Stanford's Virality Project cited him as an example. I forget the language they used, but it was something like he is almost always actionable. But essentially, he was the prototypical example of somebody who can be censored not for what they're saying, not for the content of their message,
but because they just showed up.
Yeah,
you don't have to put all kinds of fancy filters. You just put the name in, and whatever comes up under it, you can probably just strike out.
Right. Yeah. And then he goes and testifies before the same weaponization of government committee, and they try to hold the whole hearing in executive session. It's a hearing about free speech, and they're so tone deaf that they try to move the whole thing like he's Bobby Seale at the Chicago 7 trial or whatever it is, being bound and gagged or something like that. It was the symbolism of that was astonishing. And now he's basically saying, you know what? Screw you. I don't care what my dingbat relatives tweet. I am going to do this campaign, and if I have 9%, if I have 10%, you sure as hell can't have them. And you know what? Good for him.
And Matt, I'm absolutely certain that another motivation is that this person who has been challenged for most of his public crusades, particularly against, massive childhood vaccinations, but in other public health areas, and recently because of his comments on the deaths of his own father and grandfather, and uncle. I'm sure that person who has been smeared as a conspiracy theorist and a crackpot and a quack and so on, rather covets the notion of having federal power under the shelter of the US presidency that would allow him to look at the damn documents that would vindicate his cases.
Right. Yes.
I mean, how could you not? I mean, how could you not want the access at the end of your life to the source material around the death of your own dad? I mean, David Axelrod, have you not ever read a book? Can anyone deny a son that mission? And they wouldn't even talk to him. Kennedy also said that he tried to make contact with Harris's campaign. He tried to communicate with her. She wouldn't pick up the phone. They wouldn't even speak to him.
Wow. I mean,
let's
look.
the Democratic Party. Let's concede that it's valuable as such in some way. That I don't know. That just having it is a wonderful thing. But they don't get to abrogate the rules of actual, biblical and epic human loyalty to their bloodlines, their countries, the children and neighbors around them. I mean, they are not yet that godlike and should expect that level of fealty for what? Fucking you?
They also seem to be angry that he's expressing his own judgment about the death of his own father and uncle. Like he doesn't have a right to even talk about that. It's just so frustrating.
It will come as no surprise to any of our listeners that I've researched those deaths to a degree, and he's absolutely right that even more than in the case of JFK, the assassination of RFK is just unbelievably distorted in its official explanation.
Yep. Just quickly, just because I wanted to get the quote right. Here is what they said in the Virality Project about RFK. There was a memo about what to they were discussing how to deal with certain people, and they said there was a category: known repeat offenders, false or misleading posts from the accounts of well-known repeat offenders such as Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Sherry Tenpenny. This is a large volume of content that is almost always reportable.
So junior censors, if you catch an RFK thing, you're probably not going to screw up, and the bounty will be yours.
Just ipso facto censor or whatever. Just go ahead.
A guy whose name has become synonymous with disinformation,
right? Yeah.
Won't accept the judgments of the people who did that to him.
Yeah, I know.
An opportunity for vindication.
I want to throw two middle fingers up on the guy's behalf. I remember seeing the traffic because I think it was it was that British organization. I'm blanking on their name right now, but that's the one that Elon sued. But they sent a letter. They helped organize a letter with 12 attorneys general urging Twitter to take RFK Jr. off. And then, immediately there was some kind of coordination with I believe it was the Financial Times and some other papers that were saying, "Did you take him off yet? Did you take him off yet?" I mean, we saw today, CNN and MSNBC both cut away in the middle of his speech. Really at the most interesting parts, and CNN's cutaway was just incredible. It was like, well, Robert Kennedy Jr. explaining why.
Here's what he looked like.
Yeah, his quixotic quest for the presidency is like explaining it. Like, you know what? To hell with your quixotic. This guy got more actual support from voters than your nominee.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I know. Like, this stuff just drives me.
Yeah, he and okay. One other point. He has a record of environmental activism. When I was younger, he was probably better known as an environmental activist than a quote anti-vaxxer and so on. Trump, I would say, is particularly weak or just oblivious to environmental causes. And anyone who is contemplating the possibility that Donald Trump might be a president would, I think, be cheered if they also value environmental issues, to think that a very strong, traditional, and knowledgeable advocate would be there in his camp. I don't see how he does anything but improve a future Trump administration, in other words. So it must be, this vilification of him must be because they do. It's not because they're worried about the Kennedys. They're worried about their own asses. And it must be an expression of fear.
Good.
Yeah.
These people need a little fear in their lives. They need a lot more fear in their lives. These people. I'm just. I thought, I was thinking about it last night. The casualness with which they've just moved from one vilification campaign to the next, as if there's no cost to any of it for any of them. We'll say this person's a foreign agent. These people are murderers because they didn't get the vaccine. These people are white supremacists. They just cook this stuff up. They throw it out in the ether like it's not going to come back on them. And with RFK Jr., look, he's got some unusual ideas. There's no doubt about it, right? Like, there's some things about him that, if you are really, really going down to the nitty gritty, he will give speeches in which he'll say things that are contradictory. Okay, whatever. But I don't think he's a bad person, and I think he's got his heart in the right place about a lot of things. And to treat him like he's some kind of enemy of the state just for the mere act of disobedience of even trying to run. And what he's doing, he's
live out his days in obscurity.
Right.
That was what they wanted from a 70-year-old man who's given his whole life to public affairs. Live out your life in obscurity. We've got this, even though we are transgressing against everything that you believe in. And then they believed that his Irish blood was supposed to somehow quietly leak out into a ditch rather than go up into their face after they treated him this way. But another thing about the speech that was newsworthy was that it was probably the most cogent and yet comprehensive short expression of frustration over Ukraine policy that I've heard. Trump doesn't really go into that. He makes these statements, sort of vague, grandiose predictions that he could end it in 24 hours, and so on. It didn't need to happen. But Kennedy, rather briefly, but in a detailed fashion, said, "This is why we're fighting. We surrounded these people. NATO came up to the doorstep, and coming from somebody from the family whose finest and most fabled hour was facing down the Russians in the Cuban Missile Crisis."
Right.
It was a remarkable statement, because he was basically saying, we have put them in the position that JFK and the United States were in during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He didn't make it explicit, but it was exactly
right. There was no missing.
There
the
was no
message.
missing the parallels, and so that too is not something that is at all part of our conversation. You know, Trump plays the negotiator who doesn't want to show his hand, tell you exactly how he'll end it, but promises to and says it's needless. They don't talk about it at all on the Democratic side, except as some kind of, holy, they talk about it the way they talked about Vietnam really early, really early, as just this kind of great torch-bearing, freedom-loving, helping mission. But
yeah, and the potential for horror in Ukraine. Well, it's already the reality.
He said 600. He said 600,000 Ukrainians are dead and 100,000 Russians. We don't even get numbers anymore.
I know.
Whatever, really.
I know. They don't even give us truck kills or body counts or any of that stuff. It's like they don't even have they don't even value us enough to even bother trying to persuade us on any of these things, even with lies. It's just frustrating.
It is a completely sealed off chamber that there is no political conversation about. The Democrats will not bring it up except as some great just vague thing that's going on to keep Europe safe or something. And that we can even talk about it at all is amazing, because he's broken the seal on it. And I hope we go on talking about it, because frankly, it should be one of the top 3 issues in the presidential election. And the larger issue of our military stance around the world should maybe be one of the top 2 or 1 issues along with the economy. But what was amazing, and the reason I really felt it was urgent to talk about this, even if we're just talking with our most hardened racket news members, is that it was amazing to feel reality walk into the room.
A little bit, yep. Mm-hmm.
It was amazing because we spent all our time having to extrapolate from these hugely symbolic, masked actions and trying to bring some memory of how things used to work to this new.
The DNC was like a wine tasting party, except where everything was a different kind of bullshit.
Yes.
Like it's like, oh well, let's see.
You like the Obama vintage. You like the Michelle Obama vintage. You like. Nobody likes the J.B. Pritzker vintage, but he's really rich. He gives us a lot of money. He controls the state, so we got to drink it. Okay.
There's a little bit of elderberries in this asshole, and I'm sorry, no, it's just
a little flop sweat, bad breath, and
it's humiliating to be put in the position. And look, now that we know that Kamala's the candidate, there's stuff to go through, right? Which I think journalists won't do, especially like on, for instance, on the financial front. And we'll have to do some of that, but in the moment, there's nothing. They don't give you anything, right? And so for him,
we spent all week waiting to analyze the economic, or characterize at least the economic proposals of Kamala Harris, and they were no more present than Beyonce, whose possible presence apparently they used as a stratagem to get people to watch the damn thing on the last night.
Yeah, so over there, it's make believe and not even an attractive form of it anymore, but in insults and how much do we really. How grossed out are we really? But this is different. This is real politics, and for me personally, I see this as it's kind of the fork in the road that Bernie Sanders didn't take. He obviously presented a bigger intramural challenge to the Democrats, but
he was allowed to run.
he was allowed to run, but
They
they
have
did,
no idea what he might. RFK might have presented intramural victory to the Democrats if he had run against Biden in the primaries. I mean, come on, if you want me to write a counterfactual novel about what would have happened with RFK actually allowed to run against Biden in the primaries, I don't think anybody would accuse me of non-realism if he then won.
Right. That's true. That's true. If he had actually been able to debate him, do any of those things, but Bernie got in. They did him dirty. They did him dirty twice. The biggest criticism of him was, oh well, how are we going to compete against the Republicans if he can't raise money because he doesn't take any from the big donors. He proves that he can raise money. He surges to the top of the polls. They cast him aside, in a way that some people think is dirty, other people, whatever. But they refused to accede to any of his policy stuff. And what did he do? He didn't make him pay a price. And in politics, you have to.
And politics is the act of making people pay a price on behalf of those who support you and the ideas that you are advancing. Not only do that, how does Bernie get? So here's RFK. Whatever, to David Axelrod and so on, offending against the sainted memory of his family. But Bernie got the real booby prize. He got to introduce a fat billionaire at the freaking Democratic convention.
Right. I mean,
yeah.
I know.
But sort of, be an opening act for him. Bernie didn't even get the later spot like he was, one of the stars. He had to, as they say in Montana, suck hind tit,
right?
Which means a calf sucking the back little nipple on its mother because the bigger calf is budged in ahead of it. He got billing beneath J.B. Pritzker,
right? And I am sure they did that on purpose, right?
Yeah.
Right, like for Bernie Sanders, there can't be anything more humiliating than being the warm-up act for a billionaire who basically breezed to office in Democratic controlled Illinois or whatever. They've always thought he was a backbencher. He sits there and he goes up there and delivers his speech, talking about how you should support these people who ramrodded me over and over again. And you know what? It's just too much. And Kennedy decided that he couldn't take it. I mean, I think Ambrose Bierce, I forget what the exact definition of a politician was in the Devil's Dictionary, but it was something like, the salesman who's most expert at extracting the highest possible price for selling out his constituency or something like that. You do have to extract a price. That is your job as a politician. And if you don't, you're selling out your constituency for nothing,
Right.
And he won't do it.
Well, and I want to say a couple of other things of a practical nature about, I think, the possible effects of Kennedy's decision, because I think people are like I just said, underestimating what might happen. They perhaps assume that this Leviathan party will simply cast him aside, ignore him, and the media will ignore him.
Right.
Well, the media no longer has the option of ignoring him in quite the same way if he's with Mr. Big, if he's with Trump. So I'm sure there is some level of a higher profile, which is now possible for him, and which he will exploit, and which Trump will exploit, right? Why wouldn't he? So we're going to see RFK. We're going to keep seeing him, number one. Number two, and this is a subtle point, RFK appealed to the conscience of other people like him in the Democratic Party. He said there's a problem with corruption, there's a problem with censorship, there's a problem with election manipulation. He didn't say voter fraud or anything like that, but I think that one effect may be that buried in that party and in the federal government are a lot of people who would like to tell the truth. A lot of people who would like to have some courage and actually blow the whistle on some real bullshit that's gone on.
For sure.
And I think that Kennedy was most dangerous in his modeling moral courage for those people who could really come out and screw up the joy crusade.
Yes, and not just that joy is an empty message. There's stuff under there that is ugly, that is anti-democratic, that is corrupt in the most severe kinds of ways, and it's going to come out eventually. And this move by him is a model. It gives people psychic permission. Some people permission to say,
well, you see, the Democrats have this phrase called permission structures, and they use it in a very sort of systematic, pseudoscientific way. It means that if they want somebody to come over, like right now, if they want somebody from the white working class to come over to the Democrats, they get people like Tim Waltz and country music stars and so on to model coming over to the Democrats. And that is a permission structure, which will allow the hesitant Jiffy Lube employee, which is my new way that I sort of characterize the swing state working class, that make it possible for them to come over. RFK is creating a much more powerful permission structure for much more powerful people by saying, look what I just did. You can do it too. And I think there was the message that you too have been screwed over. Admit it. You too you might have come into this federal government or into this political system inspired by my father or my grandfather. I mean, my uncle. Well, it's time for us to do something. And I think there was a call implicit in what he did to people, to insiders, maybe people in, high up offices or, bureaucratic positions to get real.
Yeah. And yes, for permission structures. And also what's he's going to say, he's implicitly saying, do your worst, right? Because we all know what's going to happen now. There is going to be an avalanche of hit pieces such as the world has not seen since Trump first appeared on the scene. They're going to go after him. He is going to get the full rectal cavity search by the media. I mean, and it's going to go on for a good long while too, right? And what he's going to say is essentially is, you know what? So what? Right? And that is going to be the only way that people, because what happened, there are so many people who are afraid of stepping outside the trust tree, because we all know what happens once you do,
right?
And nobody wants to be that person. They don't want to be Tulsi Gabbard. They don't want to have.
You don't want to be the person who some friend from 20 years ago comes forward in the Atlantic to say he sold me a gram of coke an hour after you speak. Nobody wants that to be their life, but that's his life. But one of the calculations I think has to be in aligning himself with the most maligned person in American political history. Really, I mean, come on. We have. Per hour, there are more insults against Donald Trump than there have ever been to an American human being. By aligning himself with that and taking this fire, he exhausts that machine to some extent. One of the Democratic premises that Donald Trump is a singular threat, a unique threat, a historic all-time apocalyptic.
That's a good point. It is a good point. Yep.
But by stimulating the same level of vitriol against the next guy, people, it shows people that, wait, they can do this to anyone for anything on any basis. They'll do it to Kennedy over two issues: moral turpitude in his sexual history and
inconsistency and the Israel thing. Some people would, but they can't really do that now because they've embraced it, right? So yeah. Well, anyway, we're going to have to wrap up soon, unfortunately, because I'm my kids are going to come running in here screaming any second now. But I do think this is a historically kind of fascinating moment. What do you think we're going to see in the next couple of days? I mean, do we expect the big Sunday Times hit piece already, or is that going to be a week from now?
It is my information that there are major newspapers in the United States, or one or more, that hold kind of oppo stories against Kennedy that they have not published. I would expect they will come. We're going to see an all-out shitstorm because I don't think that the option of ignoring him is going to work.
Right. That it's not going to work. There's already enough of a structure out there to get buzz and get a message out. Between Trump and Kennedy now, they'll be able to reach a certain number of people, and they'll be able to generate interest in enough different quarters that they can't just let this go. So it's going to have to be attack mode. But I think this is it's a fascinating moment, and it's a rare moment where somebody's shown some backbone. Like I'm just so thankful for that after 8 years of just seeing everybody roll over for these jerks.
In World War I, when I've ever seen like a movie about trench warfare, like Paths of Glory, it was often required to make even the smallest advance that an officer get up on top of the trench and lead his people into absolutely withering, shredding, and almost suicidal fire. Now, it was the terrible folly we now see, but that was the way that had to be fought. Kennedy volunteered to get up and take the machine gun fire. Yep. And it's going to generate all... And the press and the media and the Dems are damned if they do and damned if they don't. If they ignore him, they let him become normal, then, he articulates what he articulated tonight over and over. And his moral authority is preserved, and the value of his endorsement. If they go against him, they expose themselves.
Well, he basically predicted what they're going to do. Yeah. So it's a reverse pre-bunking. It was almost like Nixonian. It's like, okay, we're going to do a story on all of you, right? It was right like the treatment of how, sort of telling everybody how they're going to act and how they've been acting. It's going to dull the sting a little bit of the avalanche that's coming. But anyway, I think it's a huge story, and it surprised me. I mean, we talked about it kind of behind the scenes at the RNC. There were lots of rumors then, but to see it come, and we didn't even Trump. We won't be able to get to the Trump side of this yet tonight, but we'll have plenty to talk about on Monday. I don't know. I think it's fascinating. Walter, do you have any final thoughts on this before we go?
Well, only this, and you alluded to it. This alliance has been in the works for about a month, at least. There were reasons to believe that this would have happened at the end of the RNC had Biden not dropped out.
Right.
Okay. At that point, Biden was still the candidate, and I think when he dropped out, it kind of short-circuited this alliance, because Kennedy had to look at the new chessboard and say, what does it look like when he's not running? Once they had consolidated their, behind their designated nominee,
President of Joy.
Yeah, because he might have seen an opportunity there. Well, they, they gave him the cold shoulder from hell. But now that has all resolved itself, here he is.
Yep, here he is. And Walter, you're absolutely right. It's reality, and boy, does it feel good to have a little bit of reality in our lives. So there's a lot of stuff. I think we're both working on some things. Monday we'll have lots to talk about, and maybe even write about also in Racket as well. But everybody, thanks for coming out. We had a nice, another really good crowd tonight, as we have all week. And this has been really, really fun doing this. And I think it's important that, when something like, like this happens on short notice, that we be able to just scramble wherever we are, even if it's in a children's theme park, as I am right now. So, yeah, exactly. Okay. But thanks, everybody. Thanks, Walter. And everybody have a good weekend.
Yeah. See ya, man.